When I cleared my quarantine last Monday, I looked at the calendar and noted that I was supposed to be in Buffalo at training camp with our officials for the 2020-21 season. And in this most unusual time, I also note that I normally would begin my remarks at the beginning of the Stanley Cup final with a welcome to the host city, which would be one of the two participating teams' home city. Frankly, I would like nothing more than to be in front of you, a room full of journalists who could ask questions in person. That, of course, would mean that we were about to drop the puck in an arena jammed with passionate NHL fans. Obviously, none of this is the case right now, and the void left by the absence of our fans is enormous and profoundly felt. What's more, it only reminds those of us fortunate enough to attend the final every year of what we might otherwise take for granted. There is nothing as thrilling in sports as being at a Stanley Cup final game. That said, one of the goals of our return to play has been to recreate that experience to the greatest extent possible for everybody watching and reporting from home. While I will leave it up to you to judge how well we'll do, and we've done, in achieving that goal, let me offer some observations. I always say, both in settings like this and in just about every meeting of the NHL Board of Governors or general managers, and in every strategy session we have, everything begins with what takes place on the ice. Only when the game is in good shape can we be meaningful and impactful. So here's what our game has looked like since we returned. The first shift of the first game of the qualifying round between the Hurricanes and Rangers was thunderous. Big clean hits, a goal, and two teams playing as if they were shot out of cannons. So much for rink rust. The first game of the first round was an instant classic, a 5-overtime epic between the Lightning and Blue Jackets. So much for our return to play plan in two rinks with as many as 3 games a day when we scheduled 2 hours between games, thinking that would be plenty of time. In the second round, the Flyers, Canucks, and Avalanche fought back from 3-1 series deficits to force thrilling 7th games. So much for the musings that teams that fell behind in series might just decide they'd rather go home. And in the conference finals, 8 of the combined 11 games were decided by 1 goal or 1 plus an empty netter, and 4 went into overtime. So much for trying to catch up on all the sleep lost during the qualifiers and first 2 rounds. Which brings me to the first group that deserves our admiration, if not awe, for what they've done to get us to this point, and that is obviously NHL players. From the moment we began discussing a way to get our game back up and running, the players have been not just essential partners in the effort, but in many ways the drivers and inspiration for what we ultimately put in place. Their support enabled NHLPA Executive Director Don Fehr, Special Assistant Matthew Snyder, and their staff to work with us to craft not just a return to play plan and health and safety protocols, but also the extension to the collective bargaining agreement that guarantees us labor peace for the foreseeable future. Their dedication to our game was manifested by the members of the Return to Play Committee who attended Zoom meetings as we worked to resolve a myriad of issues. And their passion for our game and its traditions never were more evident than when we were concerned about how much time they'd have to spend away from their families in the bubble. We presented options that shortened the lengths of the series in the first 2 rounds. No, they overwhelmingly said, if we're going to play for the Stanley Cup, then our winner must run the full gauntlet. Our players were steadfast that all 4 rounds should be best of 7. And once we had an extended CBA and return to play plan in place, NHL players showed their professionalism by reporting to training camps in tremendous shape, adhering to medical protocols diligently, and then, as I said, roaring into the playoffs the way they do in every other year, no matter that the calendar said August instead of April. In addition, when societal events called upon them to step out of their comfort zones and the pure focus on the playoffs, they did so genuinely and courageously. Matt Dumbus showed the way with a stirring speech on the first night of the playoffs, and Ryan Reeves, Kevin Shattenkirk, and all the players still competing did the same when they decided to take a 2-day pause in our games. That brings me to NHL Senior Executive Vice President Kim Davis, who has been focusing our diversity and inclusion efforts for the last 3 years, accelerated that work last December, and has been working tirelessly since to create programs, committees, and initiatives that will make our game more welcoming to all. We recently detailed all of these efforts in a comprehensive document that is available on NHL.com and the media website. In order to positively impact the communities in which we play, the source of our public platform must be strong, and returning our game to the ice was a team effort among hundreds of NHL staff and partners who somehow have worked longer hours since we paused our season back in March than the already long ones they had worked before. I must begin with Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, who didn't just spearhead the return to play effort, he either authored, approved, or revised every detail. Perhaps most important was the detailed medical protocols that have provided the foundation upon which all else could be built and maintained. A key element of the protocols was the daily testing regimen of all who were admitted to our bubbles. To date, we have conducted more than 31,000 COVID tests on our teams without one positive result. This is another testament to the professionalism and commitment of our players and staffs. Once a plan was put in place, NHL Senior Executive Vice President Colin Campbell and his hockey operations staff made sure game ops and game conditions were up to NHL standards. Each of our 2 cities using the 2 NHL rinks, multiple practice facilities, and multiple locker rooms, and coordinated unbelievably the movements of 24 clubs. Which brings me to NHL Chief Content and Events Officer Steve Mayer, affectionately known as the Mayor of the Bubble. Steve's efforts have drawn praise for the creativity and vision that have made our games visually dazzling for fans and our bubbles as welcoming as possible for players. But as with Deputy Commissioner Daly, vision and creativity are only half the story. Steve, NHL Executive Vice President of Events Dean Matsuzaki, and their staffs, over 150 in all, were tasked with an astounding number of jobs to set up and administer the bubbles, vetting many proposals from our clubs to serve as hub cities, selecting hotels and restaurants, contracting with delivery servicing, purchasing all sorts of equipment, including golf simulators and ping pong tables, and creating, most importantly, a secure perimeter and making sure everyone could be tested and accounted for every day. What's more, they arrived in our hub cities 2 weeks before anybody else. Their dedication and stamina and willingness to be isolated from family and friends for up to 3 months has been nothing short of remarkable. We are grateful for all they have done. I must thank the Canadian government and the provincial governments of Ontario and Alberta and Premiers Ford and Kenney, and in particular, their medical officers. Their willingness to work with us was essential. Their unwillingness to do anything to compromise the health and safety of their citizens and communities was complete, and it was a goal that we fully shared. And their success relative to other communities in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic were determinative in our selection of our 2 hubs. The City of Toronto and the Maple Leafs, led by Larry Tannenbaum and Brendan Shanahan, pushed hard for their city to serve as one of our hubs. And they were right to push us, as they proved to be terrific hosts for our 12 Eastern Conference clubs, and they played 55 games over 42 days in Scotiabank Arena. For years, Oilers owner Darryl Cates envisioned this arena, becoming the focal point of an effort that would transform downtown Edmonton with the Ice District for generations to come. His ability to turn that vision into reality made Edmonton and this spectacular Rogers Place the perfect choice, not only for our Western Conference playoffs, but to serve as host for our conference finals and the Stanley Cup final. I want to congratulate and thank Daryl, as well as Bob Nicholson and Tom Anselmi, and the entire Oilers organization for making the entire NHL feel at home. Here in Edmonton, we're at 56 days and 69 games. In addition, as a result, another special thank you to the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, without whose support we could not have brought our signature event to Edmonton. I cannot say enough about our corporate partners on both the league and club levels. They have been extremely supportive throughout our pause and have supported and enabled our return to play with their resources, talent, and devotion to the NHL. And thank you to our league broadcast partners, Rogers Sportsnet and TVA in Canada, NBC in the United States, and all the regional sports networks for bringing our game back into our fans' homes. I want to acknowledge our Board of Governors and every one of our 31 clubs. When it came time to craft a return-to-play plan, they put the greater good of our game and our league ahead of what might have been more advantageous for their own individual teams. The result has been a tournament that has lifted our entire league. And I want to congratulate our two finalists, the Dallas Stars, owner Tom Ghilardi, and Brett Alberts, Jim Lights, Jim Nill, coach Rick Bowness, and all the players led by Captain Jamie Benn, and obviously as well the Tampa Bay Lightning, owner Jeff Vinnick, and Steve Griggs, Julian Brisebois, Coach John Cooper, and all the players led by Captain Steven Stamkos. Making it to the Stanley Cup final in any year is a test of will, endurance, and skill unmatched in all of sports. Doing it this year and ultimately winning the Stanley Cup might just be the most remarkable achievement in the history of our league. And finally, I want to thank our fans. Yes, we wanted to come back and finish our season. And yes, the players wanted to come back and finish what they started a full 12 months ago. But what made it clear to all of us that we had to do everything possible to get to this point was reaching out to our fans and learning that overwhelmingly that our fans wanted us to complete the 2019-20 season and crown a Stanley Cup champion. There are truly no more passionate fans in all of sports. We cannot wait to welcome you back into our arenas. Until then, enjoy the Stanley Cup final. It should be a memorable one. And with that, Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly and I will take your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Bettman. Once again, if you want to ask a question, please click raise hand at the bottom of your screen, and when you're called, unmute. And we will start with Tom Daly of NHL.com. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, Mr. Commissioner. You just went through all the details and all the effort that went into putting this together. It's not quite the finish line yet, but was there any point, or did you ever have any doubt that you could pull this off and complete the season? And what, if anything, still kind of keeps you up at night, if there is anything?
Everything keeps me up at night. I've been up at night worrying about the number of things that we had no control of, but we had to deal with. And quite frankly, as you said appropriately, there are no victory laps. This is an update. We want to get through the Stanley Cup final in as good a shape as we've been able to do to date, and that's not something we take for granted. In the discussions we had planning and strategizing, and if you remember back to the discussions we had 4, 5, 6 months ago, we were exploring every contingency, making sure we could enact any of the options we were considering. And I think it's fair to say at every step of the way, there were people in those discussions that were skeptical that no matter how hard we planned and how creative we were, we might not be able to pull this off. But we were resolute in saying we had to do everything to try. And again, as I indicated in my remarks, our staff and the cooperation we got from the players, from all our teams, was nothing short of outstanding. Bill, anything you want to add?
No, I'm really proud of our organization, as Gary said, in terms of everybody working hard and pulling in the same direction, and obviously that includes the Players Association and the players as well. This was one big team effort, and it continues to be a team effort. As Gary said, we still have 2 weeks to go.
Thanks, Tom. Next question comes from Terry Jones from the Edmonton Sun. Go ahead, Terry.
It's for you, Gary. We're in a situation here in Edmonton where the World Juniors are coming up, and they're going to be in a bubble situation. I was wondering if the National Hockey League will offer some of the resources that you've been dealing with here to the World Junior people for their thing, and while I've got you. Obviously, the All-Star games and drafts and that are being pushed back, but considering what you've witnessed here and then the arena that you referred to, when might you be able to assure Edmonton that a draft and an All-Star game might be coming to this city?
Terry, as you know, I was a proponent of this arena and the Ice District and worked very hard with Daryl Cates and then Mayor Mandel to make this a reality. And I've always said that we would bring league events here, be it the draft or the All-Star game. I think we need to get a better sense of when we're going to get to normalcy before we can commit to any dates. As it relates to the World Juniors, I think part of the announcement was an indication from the Oilers organization that what they learned in working with us helped make them a better candidate and a more viable candidate for the World Juniors, and obviously subject to whatever we may be doing at the same time, to the extent that we can be helpful to Edmonton and OEG in making the World Junior Championships a success. We'll of course be willing to do that. The cooperation, the expertise that we got from the organization that you have here in Edmonton was a critical element in making the logistics of this work, in making this building work as well as everybody envisioned it could, because it is world-class, state-of-the-art, and we're grateful for that support, and anything that we can do to repay the effort, you know we will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Next question comes from Stephen Wino of the Associated Press. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hey, Gary. I know obviously you're not done this season yet, but I'm curious, what do you think next season looks like, and what are the chances you think next season starts at that December 1st date?
Anything that anybody suggests or reads or writes or commentates about next season is nothing more than speculation. We're still focused on getting through the conclusion of the 1920 season. Obviously, we've started informally thinking about what optionality is. December 1st has always been a notional date. I will not be surprised if it slips into later December. It could slip into January, but there's no point right now in making any definitive comments on our plans because there's still too much we don't know. Nobody can tell me whether or not the border between Canada and the United States is going to be open by a date certain. Nobody can tell me what the state of COVID-19 is going to be. Nobody can tell me whether or not our arenas will be able to have either socially distanced or fully occupied buildings. And we're going to have to do the same thing we did to get ready for the return to play. Explore all the options, be flexible and agile enough to implement when the appropriate time comes. And if you remember, and I think I was subject to a little bit of criticism, after we announced the return to play plan, we didn't announce where the hubs were going to be. And people kept saying, just announce the hubs. And there was speculation it was going to be here, there, and everywhere. And I, from the outset, said, I'm not going to make that decision until I absolutely have to, and I'm going to do it based on the knowledge and data that we have in front of us, which is why we made some adjustments at the last second to go to two places where we believed COVID-19 was most under control.
Thank you, Stephen. Next question comes from Chris Johnston of Sportsnet. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Gary. Hope you're keeping well. Just to follow up on that, I'm wondering, with the border restrictions such as they are here, do you view an all-Canadian division next year as one of the options that you're weighing?
We're looking at every option, and I'm not going to single out any one, and I'm not going to even buy into the speculation that that's a possibility. If there's an option to consider it, believe me, we're considering it.
Thanks, Chris. Next question comes from Ken Campbell of the Hockey News. Go ahead, Kenny.
Ask Bill the question. He wants a question.
Well, both of my questions were just asked, and I didn't have time to lower my hand. But I guess what I would ask about, again, the possibility of next season is, where do things stand as far as people being in the arenas? Is it definite that there would have to be a vaccine in order for that to take place? Have you contemplated what sort of that may look like at all?
And it's your answer.
As you know, Ken, we're going to do whatever is safe. Health and safety of everybody involved in our game is always our foremost priority. So obviously, we're going to be very familiar with the local restrictions and the local health authority rules. As you know, we sometimes impose even stricter rules if it's the opinion of our medical advisors that we should do so. So, we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see what conditions are like. Obviously, we're all watching with interest with respect to what's going on with the European hockey leagues and their policies relating to fans and what's going on in the National Football League and what's going on in collegiate athletics. Those are all valuable data points that we'll have to consider when it comes time to start making decisions.
Thanks, Kenny. Next question comes from Eric Fisher of Sports Business. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen. I want to just continue on this theme about next season and get a sense. Your point is well taken about all the uncertainties, but with the possibility of having limited at best attendance, what's your sense of sort of the revenue or the overall fiscal health? And you're going to obviously be taking another big revenue hit in all likelihood of some sense next year, but your sense of the fiscal health of the teams in the league to weather this storm for however long it takes.
The only good news in this context is that the ownership of the 31, soon to be 32 NHL franchises has never been stronger and healthier. And while nobody has any revenue coming in right now, and owners are obviously writing checks to cover overhead and expenses, our franchises will get through this and will come out stronger on the other side. Yes, there'll be a revenue hit. It's no secret that attendance directly and indirectly impacts at least 50% of our revenues. And on whatever basis, we may or may not be able to have fans in our buildings, which, by the way, as Bill indicated, is something that may be well beyond our control in terms of local government regulations. That will determine how much the shortfall is off of where we were and off of where we were projecting. So again, while we know it'll be less, we know there's a substantial revenue impact, I'm comfortable that our franchises will be strong enough to weather this.
Thank you, Eric. Next question comes from Barry Bloom of Sportico. Go ahead, Barry.
Hi, gentlemen. I've got a couple of quick questions for you. In the recent times here, how much conversations have you guys had with commissioners of other leagues? And was baseball in touch with you when they decided to belatedly go to their bubble concept for the postseason?
Over the last 6 months, more in the early days when everybody was figuring out to do, I think there were more regular, and I don't mean like daily or weekly conversations, periodic conversations that I had with the commissioners of the other three majors. But as we and baseball and the NBA all got back to playing, I think there's been less contact because we're all focused on what we're all doing individually. But there's never a shortage of opportunity. If the need arises or you have a question, I think all of us are pretty open, communicative, and cooperative with each other.
particularly on the health and safety protocols. We've worked together. We're in frequent conversations with the other leagues, and we're all, again, pulling in the same direction.
That's a very good point, because as we were developing this, our health and safety officers were meeting, not at the commissioner level, but at that level among the 4 leagues weekly.
Yep.
And that's why we all had a hand in each other's protocols, I would suspect.
And secondarily, in another area, what's your assessment on what's going on right now with the Arizona franchise?
The Arizona franchise is under the strongest ownership it's been under as long as I can remember. And I know there's a lot of speculation going on. I think at best you're looking at a newer ownership, understanding what it takes to get your feet wet and operate a franchise. I think they'll be fine.
Thank you, Barry. Next question comes from Emily Kaplan of ESPN.com. Go ahead, Emily.
Season, but as we near the completion of this tournament, I'm curious if there's been an appetite from many of your stakeholders, whether it's the players, board of governors, TV partners, about expanding the playoffs moving forward, or you think this is just a one-off?
I've never been a fan of expanding the playoffs, and when this is all over and I have a chance to really digest and debrief, we'll do that. We played a lot of games. I still believe that our competitive balance in our regular season is the strongest in all sports, and so it will take a fair amount of convincing, to me at least, that we need to be making a change. I think what we did this year we needed to do to be fair to the clubs that were on the bubble, different bubble than this bubble, the bubble in terms of making the playoffs, and I think we did the right thing in that regard, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily a prototype for the future. In fact, I still believe that what we have in a normal year is the right way to go.
Thanks, Emily. Let's stick with ESPN.com. Greg Wyshynski. Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks a lot. For Gary or Bill, the NHL worked closely with the Hockey Diversity Alliance during the postseason on demonstrations for racial justice, social advocacy. The HDA published an 8-point plan or pledge they asked the league to agree to in July. How close are you to fulfilling those funding and policy requests from the HDA?
Well, actually, I don't think what they posted publicly included the funding request. Kim Davis has been in regular communications with the HDA. We obviously share the same goal of fighting racism, making sure the game is inclusive, diverse, and welcoming. Hopefully, we can collaborate together and work together among others who we're working with to pursue that goal, and that's an ongoing discussion.
Thanks, Greg. Next question comes from Sean Shapiro of The Athletic. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Gary, I have 2 questions that relate directly to this final. First of all, can you kind of take us through the thought process between the back-to-back in the final? And secondly, obviously there's a lot of families and players who are hoping to get families into the bubble. Can you kind of take us through what broke down or what conversations and how close that was to happening to get families here?
Bill, why don't you take those?
The back-to-back in the final. Obviously, we've used the back-to-back in every round of these playoffs. There's, one of the benefits of bubble hockey, for lack of a better term, is there's no travel. There's a lot less wear and tear on the players in terms of late nights and travel and the like. And we felt as we wanted to, and we heard from the players regularly on this, move this tournament as quickly as we could. Without certainly putting players in danger. And that's how we've scheduled. And so certainly with respect to the Stanley Cup final, a single back-to-back kind of mid to late series, we didn't think was a hardship to the players and certainly contributed to the goal of finishing as quickly as we can. With respect to player families, we made an application, as Gary alluded to in his opening remarks. The Canadian government and the Canadian health authorities, both the federal health authorities and the provincial health authorities, have been instrumental in our ability to succeed and conduct this tournament in 2 bubbles in Toronto and Edmonton. They have always answered our calls, worked with us, been as collaborative as they can be, with understanding that ultimately their primary objective and motivation, as ours, is to keep people healthy. So we made an application. We broached the player family travel issue with the Canadian government very early on in this process, really before I think we even went to training camps. They felt like at the time it was not something they could work with. But they said, let's see how the bubbles work, and you can certainly, always come back to us, and we'll pick up the phone and we'll engage in a dialogue. So, about midway through the tournament in both cities, we approached them again. We made a formal application. That application remains pending. I think at this point, I don't have a high level of expectation that it will be approved. But it has not formally been denied at this point either.
Thank you, Sean. Next question comes from Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet. Go ahead, Elliot.
For either one of you, is there any chance at all that the NHL would not resume until, say, next fall? Is it possible if you can't have fans in the building that we wait a year to play?
Elliot, same answer that I've been giving. I anticipate playing a full season next season, 82 games, full playoffs. How and when we do that is something that we don't all have enough information to make any decisions, and anything would just be sheer speculation. Our goal is to get back to as great a sense of normalcy as possible under whatever circumstances are presented.
Thank you, Elliot. Next question comes from Mike McIntyre, the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Mike.
Just to pick up, gentlemen, off that last question from Elliot, you say, Gary, are committed to an 80-game season. How important is it to get back on track here and award a Stanley Cup in June as opposed to late September? Can you potentially go another year like this and start, the 2020-21 season even later?
My preference would be to stay out of summer as much as possible. Our fans typically like watching us through the fall, winter, and into the spring, and it's always been a goal to be done by the end of June. Playing, late July, August, September is something that was important to do now, and if we can avoid it, we will. But again, it's premature to have an answer to that question, other than we understand the issue and we're going to try and deal with it as best we can.
Thank you, Mike. Next question comes from Jean-Francois Charmant of Le Journal. Go ahead, JF.
I have a question for Bill or Gary. Is it possible for you to play a complete season without any fans, or you're going to wait till the date where it's possible to have a percentage of fans in the building? I know it's hard to answer because there's a difference for the 31 markets, but can you imagine a season without a fan in the stands?
Why don't you try this time?
Well, yeah, as Gary has said, I think, we're going to see what the circumstances are like and do the best we can. Obviously, we recognize the importance of having fans in the buildings to our business. We certainly want to maximize efforts to create circumstances where fans can attend our games, and we can wait a certain amount of time to try to accommodate that. But at the end of the day, we also want to play a season, so we're gonna see what circumstances are like and make decisions when we need to make decisions.
I'm going to add one thing to that. How we start doesn't necessarily relate to how we're going to finish. So if we're going to speculate, and this is pure speculation, I'm just throwing it out there as a random thought. It's conceivable that we start without fans, that we move to socially distant fans at some point, and by some point in time, maybe our buildings are open. I'm not saying that's the case, but if you're thinking through all of the conceivable possibilities, there's full, there's empty, there's a combination, and again, how we start doesn't necessarily mean that's how we have to finish.
Thank you, JF. Next question comes from Neil McHale of InsideHockey.com. Go ahead, Neil.
Hi, this is for either of you here. There's been all of these media outlets and, smaller publications that have been able to cover the playoffs and, different groups in Europe that are always trying to track some of the National Hockey League talent as well. I wonder if at a moment you looked at some of these Zoom things and found a bit of a positive in that, and if there's a way to continue to maintain that in years to come whenever the normal happens to exist.
Well, I think that we've learned a lot. And the Zoom calls, I think, have been great. And I don't suggest that's the way we'll go in the future. But certainly there are lessons learned and things that we can incorporate in our future protocols that will be very helpful, I think.
And just as a note of assurance, we're not looking to long-term deprive the media of the access that you've historically had. If we use Zoom, it's an enhancement, but when things get back to normal, our media policies and access will get back to normal as well.
Thank you, Neil. Next question is a follow-up from Ken Campbell. Go ahead, Ken.
Gary, all this uncertainty sort of got me thinking about Seattle and about their entrance into the league. And I mean, they may not have junior leagues to scout or American leagues to scout next year. Do you envision any scenario under which maybe you delay their entrance into the league by a year if there's a worst case scenario here with this virus?
No. I want that answer to be as definitive as possible. David Bonderman's ownership group, Todd Lewicki, and the organization he's put together, they cannot wait to get started. The building is progressing, and we have every reason to believe that they will start when we begin the season after next.
Thanks, Ken. Next question comes from Jamie Stewart. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hi, Gary. You've been very close with the Islanders' plight over the last 20 or so years to get a new arena. Now that they finally have one, and they have the great management, and they just came off this unexpected great playoff run, just curious, your thoughts on the turnaround from, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago to now. And do you think, is there any update on permanent home games for next season?
Well, the first part of your question is it's great to see how well they're doing. I like all of our teams to do well, actually. I actually spoke to Scott Malkin, the principal owner of the Islanders, after they were eliminated. He couldn't have been more excited, more upbeat. Obviously, he was disappointed that they didn't make it to the Stanley Cup final. He has the utmost confidence in Lou Lamoriello, obviously for good reason. Their business is strong. They're selling tickets and sponsorships and all sorts of business relationships in the most vibrant way. And he's optimistic and upbeat. The arena is progressing nicely. I'm not worried about where they play next season. Something will get figured out with the Nassau Coliseum because somebody's going to manage it for the county, and that's just a logistical issue in terms of the legal relationships as to who's going to be running it. Not an issue, and things are doing great on the island, and that's a testament to Scott Malkin and his commitment to Long Island, the metropolitan area, the Islanders, and the new arena that is going to be spectacular, state-of-the-art. UBS, as the naming partner, is just terrific.
Thank you, Jamie. I have a couple more questions. Next one is from Michael Russo of The Athletic. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, guys. Granted, I know how excited you are to talk about next season still, but I just a question,
Very perceptive.
In 3 months, yeah. In 3 months, the Winter Classic is scheduled. Knowing how impossible it is to really talk about what life is like 3 months from now, it's very hard for the Wild to sell this game. Do you think it's pretty likely that that's postponed?
I don't know the answer to that as we sit here today. But if it were to be, we would make appropriate, suitable arrangements to make it up to the great fans in Minnesota of the Wild. And, how we conduct our major events, obviously, has the ability to be impacted by everything else that's going on. So the answer is we'll make good on it in some fashion if, in fact, we can't do it as planned.
Thanks, Mike. Now we have a follow-up question from Greg Wyshynski. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, thanks a lot. Gary, there was a report on TSN that Florida Panthers assistant coach Mike Kitchen had a physical altercation with a player on the bench, and that the team was aware of it in January. That was a month after you talked about a zero-tolerance policy for not reporting abuse. So did the team tell you about the incident, and then why was Kitchen allowed to finish out the season, in your opinion?
Bill, you want to answer that?
The team made me aware of the incident a while ago, and we discussed with the team the appropriate approach. The team conducted its own investigation and made its own decision.
Thanks, Greg. And the honor of the final question goes to Alan Krita from the New York Times. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary and Bill. Good to see you both. Gary, you spoke months ago about how you would be most thrilled or you'd exhale when you could raise the cup. Can you see the light at the end of the tunnel now? And for both of you, what are you most proud of, aside from the obvious zero positive tests over these months, to achieve this point?
Actually, handing the cup over to the captain of the winning team will probably be the first time since March 12th I'll breathe a sigh of relief, and maybe I'll get a full night's sleep. You can't single out one thing to be proud of. I'm proud of the collaboration that everybody in the hockey community participated in, whether it was the players as a group, whether it was our staff, whether it was the team, all the things, whether it was the local communities where we put the hubs. It all contributed to where we are today. And again, we still have a little ways to go. I think in the history of labor relations in the National Hockey League, the level of cooperation, collaboration, the status of our relationship has never, ever been better, more cooperative, more collaborative, and I give a great deal of credit, if not all of it, to Don Fear and how working together we jointly approach things. This was, in the consummate team sport, the consummate team effort, and I'm grateful for everybody who participated.
Okay, well, that was the final question. Thank you, Commissioner Bettman. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.